The Senate hall became quiet when Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett walked toward the witness seat. Her black coat neatly ironed, her natural hair shaped into a smooth bob that reflected the ceiling lights. The 33-year-old ex-public defender from Texas had been invited to speak about voting rights laws, but what followed would surprise the entire country. Senator Lindsey Graham sat at the panel table, his cheeks already turning red, clutching a pile of documents like tools of war. The Republican from South Carolina had been getting more and more annoyed as the meeting went on, and everyone in the room could feel the pressure growing like a storm about to burst. "Miss Crockett." Graham's voice broke through the mic, his southern accent thick with barely hidden anger. "You Democrats think you can just come in here and give us speeches about democracy while you're actually ruining it." The crowd reacted instantly. Camera flashes burst like thunderbolts. Crockett stayed steady. She calmly moved her mic, looked right at Graham, and gave a small smile. What happened in the next half-minute would be replayed millions of times all over social media, changing what was a normal Senate hearing into the biggest political moment of the year. Graham believed he could scare the young black congresswoman from Texas. He was completely mistaken. Before we get into this amazing face-off, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more fiery political showdowns. To see why this clash was so powerful, we need to understand who these two politicians really are and what made this moment heat up. The senator from South Carolina built his name by being a loud critic. He never held back his voice or his opinions. He had fought through many tough political fights, from impeachment cases to picking Supreme Court judges. Graham liked to think of himself as a protector of traditional Senate manners, which to him meant that younger Democrats should show proper honor to older members. But Graham's year wasn't going well. His approval ratings in his home state were dropping. Younger Republicans were calling him a Reno Republican in name only. The Trump supporters who once cheered for him were turning away. He needed to remind them that he was still the tough guy they once backed. Across the room was Jasmine Crockett, and she was totally different. At just 33, she belonged to a new wave of Democratic leaders who didn't follow the old ways. Before being elected, she worked as a civil rights lawyer and a public defender in Dallas, helping those who couldn't help themselves. She didn't come to Washington to fit in or follow old customs. She came to get results. In her short time in Congress, Crockett had already grabbed attention for her strong questioning during hearings. Unlike older Democrats who usually tried to find middle ground, Crockett believed in standing firm. Her rule was simple: respect must be earned, not just given because of age or position. The bill they were discussing would decide if millions of Americans, especially people of color, would keep or lose their voting rights. To Graham, this was about protecting what he called election honesty. But to Crockett, this was about saving democracy itself. The hearing had been intense all morning. Republican senators were tough on Democratic speakers, cutting them off, interrupting, and making rude side remarks. Crockett noticed everything, writing notes, and waiting for her turn. Graham had been especially harsh. He had already yelled at two other people, hit the table with his hand, and made comments that had Democrats shaking their heads. The cameras loved it. Graham was playing the role of the angry right-wing warrior, standing up to what he said were woke Democrats, trying to control state elections. But Graham made one big mistake. He underestimated the young woman from Texas who was next in line to speak. There was already a backstory between them. 6 months earlier, during a House Judiciary hearing, Crockett questioned a witness Graham had recommended. Her questions were so sharp that they destroyed Graham's claims about voter fraud. Graham was furious and called her style trick, politics, and show-off behavior. Since then, Graham had made comments about young Democrats not knowing how things work in D.C. He never used Crockett's name, but everyone knew who he meant. Political watchers had been waiting for this face-to-face moment, and Crockett had been getting ready. She'd studied Graham's methods, watched his past hearings, and learned how he worked. She even told her team that morning, "If Senator Graham wants heat, I'll show him Texas fire." Everything was in place. An older senator who believed his senior status and loud voice could scare anyone, and a young congresswoman who made her name by standing up to bullies in Texas courts. The country was about to see what happens when an unstoppable force meets an unmovable wall. The pressure in the committee room had been building like a cooker about to blow. Graham had already shown his hand. He was attacking every speaker, raising his voice, turning questions into blame. "Congresswoman Crockett," he started, his voice smooth but fake as he sorted his notes, "you've been very outspoken about this voting rights bill. Tell me, with all your great experience, he paused, adding heavy sarcasm. How do you defend federal involvement in state voting laws? Crockett leaned forward slightly, her hands calmly resting on the table. Senator Graham, she said, thank you for the question. Federal protection of voting rights isn't meddling. It's a duty under the Constitution. The 15th Amendment. Oh, please, Graham, cut in, raising his voice. Don't talk to me about the Constitution, young lady. I was learning that stuff when you were in grade school. The room reacted. A few Democratic senators looked uneasy. Republican staff behind Graham glanced at each other. This was heating up faster than normal, even for Graham. But Crockett didn't react. Senator, with all respect, she said, the Constitution doesn't expire just because someone learned it earlier. The principles stay the same, whether you studied them in 1985 or 2015. You Democrats arrive here, armed with scripted lines and moments crafted for viral fame. Yet you seem unaware of the real-world effects your proposals may bring. Rising from his seat, a deliberate show of dominance, Graham, standing at 6 feet, loomed over the seated Crockett. These voting laws you seek to undo, he said, were enacted by legislatures elected by the people. He paused. But I suppose democracy only matters to you when it suits your narrative, right? The cameras closed in, capturing the intensity on both sides. Graham's face was red, jaw clenched tight, and a pulsating vein appeared on his forehead. Crockett, by contrast, remained poised. Only a subtle narrowing of her eyes revealed the calculations behind her calm expression. Senator Graham, she began, her voice unwavering, you've mentioned democracy quite a few times. Could you clarify how restricting voter access helps strengthen it? That's not what we're doing, Graham retorted, his voice booming across the room. We're defending the integrity of our elections. Something you wouldn't grasp, because all I care about is what? Crockett interjected smoothly, without raising her voice. Caught off guard, Graham charged forward, without thinking. You care about playing the victim. You come here crying voter suppression, but your real goal is to make cheating easier. You want to throw out voter ID, toss aside signature verification, and get rid of every safety measure we have. Still composed, Crockett's voice sharpened slightly. Are you accusing me personally of promoting election fraud? I'm saying you Democrats. No, Senator, Crockett cut in, firmer now. You pointed at me. You said I want to make cheating easier. Are you making a personal accusation against me? The room froze. Even the stenographer's fingers paused. Realizing the gravity of his words, Graham hesitated, but pride held him back. I'm talking about your party's policies, he muttered. Crockett's tone finally lifted. I'm a former prosecutor, Senator. I know the difference between critiquing policy and accusing someone of a crime. Which one are you doing? This was the turning point. Graham, cornered by his own rhetoric, lashed out. You know what? He bellowed, voice cracking under pressure. I'm tired of these lectures from loud young know-it-alls. I've been fighting for conservative values longer than you've been alive. He paced furiously, hands flailing, scattering papers across the table. The microphone picked up his every breath, every tremble in his voice. You show up in DC thinking you're here to change the world, but you don't even understand how it works. You're just another social media star hunting for likes. The committee chairman, a Republican from Iowa, looked uncomfortable, leaning toward his aide with hushed urgency. Other GOP senators glanced at their phones, watching clips labeled Graham meltdown and Senator loses it already circulating online. When the chairman attempted to step in, Graham spun around. I'm not finished, he roared. These young Democrats think they can insult this chamber, mock those who've served here for decades, and expect us to just sit quietly. His face now beat red, sweat glistening under the committee room lights. He turned back to Crockett, jabbing a finger toward her, a gesture destined to go viral. Well, I won't tolerate it. Not from you. Not from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Not from any of you. This is the U.S. Senate, not some college debate club. Crockett didn't flinch. While Graham shouted and flailed, she remained motionless. Hands clasped, face calm yet watchful. She looked more like a seasoned attorney watching a prosecutor. Unraveled before the jury, every moment was captured. Graham red-faced and raging. Crockett, composed and unmoved. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. Everyone present sensed history unfolding. When Graham finally slumped into his seat, breath ragged, the silence was absolute. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed louder. All eyes turned to Crockett. She took a sip of water, adjusted her mic with care, and looked directly at Graham. A faint, confident smile played on her lips. "Are you done, Senator?" she asked. Softly, the question landed like a challenge in the silence. Graham, still catching his breath, gave a short nod. "Good," Crockett replied, her voice now resolute. "Because it's my turn." And with that, the tension in the committee room reached its peak. Senators, staffers, journalists, and C-SPAN viewers waited to witness Crockett's answer to Graham's eruption. She took another measured sip, set the glass down with precision, locked eyes with Graham, and began to speak in a voice calm, deliberate, and devastatingly clear. "You've just shown exactly why I came here, to highlight the urgent need for national protections on voting rights." Graham attempted to cut in, but Crockett calmly raised one finger, an intentional, composed move that stopped him instantly. "No, sir," she said. "You had plenty of time to speak without being interrupted. Now it's my chance, and I plan to use this time better than you used yours." The energy in the room was intense. Even GOP senators leaned forward, sensing something remarkable was unfolding. "You called me young and loud, Senator Graham. You're partially right. I am young, I'm 33, but loud. Not once during this discussion have I raised my voice." She turned slightly toward him, offering a subtle smile. "However, your tone speaks volumes." Soft laughter moved through the chamber. Graham's face was still flushed, but now more with shame than frustration. "You also said, I don't grasp how DC operates. Well, let me tell you what I do understand, Senator. I understand that for too long, this city has worked in a way where powerful men shout when they dislike the truth-thinking volume replaces facts." She let the point hang in the air. "I understand that when younger women, especially women of color, dare to ask real questions, they're called rude instead of being given real answers. But since you mentioned constitutional law, let's discuss that. You said you were studying the Constitution while I was still in elementary school. That's likely true. I'd have been around 8 when you joined Congress." Graham squirmed slightly. He could feel where this was headed. "But here's what's interesting. In all those decades of studying the law, did you ever run into the 15th Amendment? The one that says no person's right to vote can be denied or limited by race, color, or former condition of servitude." She opened a folder gently. "Because I have here the voting statistics from your home state, South Carolina. The numbers clearly show that counties with more black residents face longer voting lines, fewer polling sites, and harsher ID laws per person." She looked straight at him. "As someone who's spent a career studying constitutional law, how do you explain that, given the 15th Amendment?" Graham looked like he wanted to reply, but she wasn't done. "Do you want to know something else I've picked up about how this body operates? Some people believe being here longer means what they say automatically matters more." She leaned in slightly, voice firm but still calm. "Since you're so focused on my resume, let me explain. Before Congress, I was a public defender in Dallas County, Texas. You know what that role involves, Senator. It means I stood up for people who had no money to defend themselves, facing the full legal system with nothing but me in their corner." She edged forward slightly. "I've stood in courtrooms where prosecutors used loud voices, long experience, and political clout to try to silence me. I've met judges who assumed a young black woman shouldn't question them. And you know what those moments taught me? That when someone yells instead of answering, it usually means they have nothing real to say." She took out another document. "Let's talk facts now. You brought up election integrity. I support election integrity, too, Senator. So let's examine the numbers." She held up a page. "In the 2020 election, more than 2.9 million votes were cast nationwide. You know how many verified cases of voter fraud were found?" She paused briefly. "The Heritage Foundation, a conservative group, by the way, reported only 31 cases. 31 out of nearly 60 million ballots." Graham began to speak again, but she continued smoothly. "That's a fraud rate of 0.00019%. Meanwhile, the voting laws you support would make it harder for millions of eligible people to cast a vote." She looked him in the eye. "So here's the real question, one you haven't answered. How is it justifiable to make voting harder for millions just to stop 31 incidents of fraud? I don't claim to be right just because I'm young. I believe I'm right because I deal in facts, and the facts are on my side." She shut the folder and stared directly at him. "You mentioned generational gaps. Well, let me clarify how my generation thinks. We don't think being louder makes you more correct. We don't think being older automatically makes you wiser. And we certainly don't think that scaring people makes you smarter. The room was silent except for the soft hum of phones buzzing. As people shared clips online in real time, my generation believes in doing the homework. We believe in showing up with date, not drama. We believe in respecting others, no matter their age, background, or political side. And we believe democracy should be open to everyone, not just to those you believe are worthy. She turned her eyes back to Graham. You've been in this chamber for 28 years, Senator, and with all that experience you often point out, can you name even one voting law you've backed that helped Americans vote more easily? The pause was heavy. Graham opened his mouth, then closed it again. He shuffled his stack of papers, avoided her eyes, then looked back at her. Every second of his discomfort was caught on camera. Behind him, Republican aides were already glued to their phones watching the viral moment take off. She repeated her words softly, her voice now sounding almost caring. Graham said nothing. The silence was overwhelming. In the audience section, journalists were rapidly typing. Democratic senators were trying not to grin. Even some Republicans looked uneasy as they watched their fellow senator struggle to respond to such a clear question. Crockett continued speaking, flipping open her folder once more. She listed examples. The South Carolina voter ID law you supported back in 2010. Your backing for fewer early voting days. Your resistance to automatic voter registration. Your votes not once, but twice, against the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Then she looked up from her notes, her face nearly expressionless. So I have to ask, she said, in all your years studying constitutional law, did you skip the part where democracy is about letting people vote, not blocking them? Or did you just choose to believe that some votes count more than others? The room was completely still. The noise from cameras clicking sounded like thunder. Graham's face, once red, had turned pale. His hands shook slightly as he held onto his pen. This wasn't just a moment of political loss. It was a total, intellectual takedown shown live on national television. I respect your experience, she added, but experience without wisdom is just time ticking by. Wisdom is knowing that maybe, just maybe, someone younger than you can have something worthwhile to add. She looked at the senators around her. I didn't come here to be rude. I came here to do what I was elected to do. Speak up for the people I represent and protect their rights under the Constitution. If that means I'm called young and loud, I'll wear that proudly. But if you're ready for a real discussion, one based on evidence and facts, not shouting and blaming, then I'm ready, too. She turned back to Graham once more. The decision is yours, Senator. The man once known as one of the most fearsome voices in the Senate had just been calmly taken apart by someone young enough to be his daughter. And she had done it without raising her tone, without any personal insults, and without losing her calm. The committee chair, clearly shaken, announced a short break. The cameras were still on. Graham packed up his papers quickly and left the room without looking at anyone. Crockett stayed seated, neatly sorting her notes while Democratic colleagues came up to shake her hand and praise her. But the biggest reaction wasn't in the hearing room. It was online. Within minutes, videos of the exchange were going viral across social platforms. The internet was on fire. The hashtag #CrockettClapsBack was trending on Twitter. Instagram was filled with stories showing her calm and powerful reply. TikTok users had already started remixing her lines into viral clips. One of the most viewed clips showed Graham shouting and pointing, while Crockett sat still and quiet, followed by her asking calmly, "Are you done, Senator?" A Twitter user who followed politics wrote, "Jasmine Crockett just gave a lesson on how to stand up to a bully. That's real strength." The tweet got 47,000 retweets in just an hour. On TikTok, a split-screen video paired Graham's shouting with aggressive music, then cut to Crockett's reply, set to soft classical music. It had over 2 million views by the end of the day. Even conservative voices had to acknowledge what happened. Fox News commentator Brit Hume tweeted, "No matter your political views, Crockett stayed impressively calm. Graham looked like he lost it." House Speaker Hakeem Jeffries released a statement. "Congresswoman Crockett showed today why she's one of our rising stars. She proved you can be strong without shouting, and effective without being harsh." Alexandria Ocasio, whom Graham had mentioned in his rant, tweeted, "That's how you do it. Facts, composure, grace under fire. Crockett just gave America a lesson in leadership." Even Barack Obama, who rarely comments on daily political fights, shared the video with the caption, "This is the kind of thoughtful, fact-based debate our democracy truly needs." Graham, once seen as one of the Senate's Most skilled fighters had performed terribly. Some tried to defend him, saying he was simply passionate about election security. But the visuals told a different story. Senator Ted Cruz tried to shift the narrative. Lindsey was rightfully frustrated about Democrats trying to control elections federally. But even his post was overwhelmed with replies, noting that Graham had not made any real points, only personal attacks. Privately, some GOP senators told reporters they weren't happy. One said anonymously, "She destroyed him. There's no other word. He looked like an angry old man, and she looked like the only adult in the room." CNN's Anderson Cooper devoted a full segment to the exchange. He brought in experts in body, language, and political speech. "This was a textbook example of how not to debate," Cooper said. Graham let emotion cloud his judgment, while Crockett stayed focused and calm. Body language expert Lillian Glass broke it down. "Look at how Crockett kept her hands folded, maintained eye contact, and never flinched. Graham was pointing, pacing, and his voice cracked. Signs he'd lost control. Crockett stayed calm and in charge." MSNBC's Rachel Maddow opened her show by applauding Crockett's preparation. She clearly came ready. When Graham tried to shake her, she had data. When he tried to dismiss her, she had facts. When he got personal, she stayed constitutional. That's how political communication should work today. Political strategist Steve Schmidt added context. What Crockett did was brilliant. She let Graham unravel by himself. Then she quietly dismantled every argument using facts that couldn't be denied. That wasn't just smart politics, it was brilliant lawyering. Even Fox News, usually supportive of Republican senators, found it hard to stand behind Graham's actions. Tucker Carlson, a well-known conservative host, said on his nightly show, "Look, I agree with Lindsey on election integrity, but that's not the right way to present your case." She completely outplayed him. When you end up shouting while your opponent calmly quotes constitutional amendments, you've already lost the debate. Jennifer Lawless, a political expert from the University of Virginia, explained why this moment mattered. She said it showed a major change in how politicians debate. For years, seniority and loud voices ruled in Washington. But younger leaders, like Crockett, are proving that being well prepared and staying calm can be more powerful. The exchange also revealed ongoing issues about race and gender in politics. Many pointed out that Graham's aggressive behavior, especially when he stood and pointed at Crockett while shouting, reflected deeper problems in how Black women are treated in professional spaces. Kimberly Crench, a legal expert who studies intersectionality, wrote in the Washington Post, "Graham's actions were a clear example of how Black women in power are often faced with intimidation in ways white men rarely are." Political advisors from both sides saw the moment as important. Democratic strategist James Carville said it felt like a new generation was stepping up. Young Democrats needed someone who could take on Republican bullying without lowering themselves. Crockett just showed them how. Republican strategist Karl Rove was more critical of his own side. This was a lost chance. Republicans need to talk about election integrity using facts and logic, not emotions or threats. Graham gave Democrats the perfect viral moment. In the days that followed, Lindsey Graham tried different ways to fix the damage. First, he doubled down, telling Fox News, "I won't apologize for being passionate about protecting elections." But this made things worse. Social media users compared his emotional outburst to Crockett's.com and fact-based argument. Then he tried a softer tone in a radio interview, saying, "Maybe I got a little too emotional, but these are serious issues." Still, people thought it was too late. Finally, he changed topics completely, trying to avoid talking about the exchange at all. But the internet had already decided. The video kept spreading online, building support for Jasmine Crockett. The moment made her a national figure. She started getting speaking invites from all over the US. Democratic donors saw her as a rising leader. Her name even started popping up in political predictions for future presidential races. In a Washington Post interview, Crockett looked back on that day. "I didn't walk into that hearing looking for a fight," she said. "I came ready to talk about voting rights. But when someone tries to scare you, you only have two options: step back or stand tall. I chose to stand tall." She also talked about the bigger message. "I think people connected with seeing someone who refused to be pushed around. In politics, loud voices often replace real answers. I wanted to show that you can be strong without yelling and effective without being rude." Months later, political experts and analysts still referred to the Crockett-Graham moment as a turning point in American politics. Harvard's Kennedy School added the video to its course on crisis communication and strategy. Sarah Mitchell, a professor at Georgetown University who teaches political messaging, said it struck a nerve. Crockett showed something rare, how being prepared is stronger than being passionate. She showed you can lead without being loud, and be firm without being harsh. The clip became required watching in communication classes across the country. Students studied how she stayed calm, backed her words with facts, and flipped her opponent's aggression against him. Law schools started using it to teach effective cross-examination. It also became a key case in how politicians can communicate effectively in the age of social media. Political advisor David Axelrod said, Graham's style might have worked in the past, when only insiders saw everything. But now, with viral videos and quick reactions, Crockett's calm and clear approach wins. She understood the media and used it perfectly. International audiences noticed too. The BBC ran a segment comparing the moment to debates in the UK Parliament. The report highlighted how Crockett's calm confidence stood out from the usual shouting in Westminster. The reporter said, American politics may be learning the strength of staying cool under pressure. But maybe the most powerful result was the message sent to young politicians, especially young women and people of color, about dealing with disrespect and pressure. Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett summed it up during a Democratic women's event. Jasmine showed every young woman watching that you don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to be harsh to be strong. Sometimes the most powerful move is staying calm, stating the truth, and letting your opponent trip over their own words. The old political style, where the loudest voice and highest rank could silence others, is being replaced by a new way. One where facts, readiness, and composure win. That day, Jasmine Crockett didn't just win a debate. She introduced a new kind of leadership that connected deeply with Americans tired of shouting and eager for real answers. Senator Graham learned the hard way. If you lose your temper in the age of social media, you lose the argument, and you lose it in front of the entire world. The question is, will other leaders follow Crockett's example? Will they choose calm and facts, or keep repeating the old habits of noise and threats? Based on how positively people reacted to Crockett's approach, it's clear what the public prefers. The future of political debates may be quieter, clearer, and far more powerful. Thanks for being with us through this unforgettable political moment. Want more breakdowns of major showdowns and viral highlights? Subscribe and hit the notification bell. Politics moves fast, and you don't want to miss the next big moment that rewrites the rules. What did you think of Jasmine Crockett's response? Was this the best way to handle a political bully, or should she have acted differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one and love hearing from you.